So in this video I'm going to be showing you guys one of the lessons that I did for Valley Forge. So the setup is basically that I'm George Washington and I came back from the past in order to recruit soldiers, which is them, and bring them back to Valley Forge. And basically they're going to be reading about what life was like in Valley Forge, all the struggles that the soldiers had to endure, and also be doing different activities to simulate kind of like a boot camp or get a feel for what it was like for these soldiers. So one of the first things that I do is I explain to them that I've come from the past. I give them a little speech, which you can see here.
He venido del pasado porque ahorita estamos peleando la revolución en contra de Gran Bretaña. Esto es ahora. Tenemos que entrenar y pelear para que sobreviva la revolución. Hemos creado un video para inspirarlos a que vengan al pasado a ayudarnos. Ahora es el tiempo. Traigan sus pistolas si las tienen y vengan conmigo para ir a entrenar a nuestros soldados y pelear. ¡Que viva la revolución!
So the goal of the speech is to get them all hyped up, right, to join the revolution, and then I show them an intro video, which I'll have linked in the description of this video. I'll also have a link to the actual lesson itself in the description of this video, so make sure you check that out after this explanation. So again, we travel back in time, and it's kind of cool the way that I do. I use this little clip of this time machine scene, and basically I flicker the lights as we start quote unquote traveling to the past, which you can see here.
Your hands must be inside the vehicle, please.
Les dije. All right. Digo, ahora hemos llegado aquí.
Then I go over the instructions of how the lesson's gonna go. So basically the lesson is set up in 5 different stations, so it's pretty simple. So they're each in a group and they're going to move from station to station when I tell them to. Now, in every station they're gonna read about a certain aspect of Valley Forge. So for example, the first one talks about Van Steuben and how he helped train these soldiers, these patriots, and they answer 2 questions about the short little passage here. Then after about 5 minutes, then I tell them, okay, the 5 minutes are over, you should have already read and answered the question, and then comes a short little activity. So for activity 1, part of station 1, what they're going to be doing is they're going to be practicing how to march. So the tallest person and all these explanations, these directions are all on the side of the station. So it's a little sheet that explains all this, and it basically explains to them that the tallest person in the group is going to be Van Steuben, who's going to be the leader, and then he is going to organize, he or she is going to organize their group into 2 rows and basically have them march. Now one thing that I did is I also got a spray bottle filled up with water to kind of simulate them marching in the rain, just to add a little bit more of that flair, of that fun to the activity, which the students seem to like. So they're going to be marching, basically practicing how to march for activity 1. Then in station 2, again, they're going to read about a passage about Valley Forge. In this case, it talks about how George Washington basically separated the people into 2 different groups as soon as they got there, and it was like a little competition to see who can build their cabins the fastest, right? So using the materials they had around them, they had to build their cabins. So after reading that, again, they answer some questions on it, and then for the activity for station number 2, what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to split up their group into 2 groups and basically go around and pick up the shoes from the other students. Oh, I forgot to mention this, but in the beginning of class, as soon as they get into the class, I tell them to leave their backpacks in one area and for them to take off their shoes. The reasoning here is that in Valley Forge, a lot of the soldiers did not have shoes, right? They had to walk barefoot in the snow and so on. So I explained that to them, and they take off their shoes. And for, again, going back to this activity, they're supposed to go around the room and collect these shoes and use these shoes to basically build little houses for them, just like they actually did in Valley Forge, right? So again, that's kind of the idea, them using the shoes around the room in order to build these little houses, if you will. So station 3, they read about, again, a short little passage, answer some questions. Then they're supposed to read about fire cake and how they had very little food and that the food wasn't very good. So this one I had to simplify because of COVID. I used to have like some food for them that they had to split as a group, very, very, very small portions. But instead, what I decided to do this year because of COVID, I basically gave them a list of really, really disgusting ingredients like pickle juice and mustard and turkey bones, chicken feet, all sorts of nasty stuff. And what they're supposed to do is kind of try to create a menu, if you will, or some sort of food that they could eat. Again, the idea here being that just like the soldiers at Valley Forge, they have to make meals with whatever they had, around them. So for station 4, again, they read, answer some questions, and then the activity here is, this one's kind of cool. So what they're supposed to do is basically train how to shoot, right? So they get paper balls, and on the board, as you can see here, I drew something for them that had different points on it, and they were supposed to shoot these paper balls and keep track of their points or whatever, just to make it a little competition. So they had to crawl, as you can see here, and then get up in the place where it said to shoot, and they're supposed to get up and shoot, right? Again, obviously simulating the training that went on, the shooting practice that went on at Valley Forge. Then finally, for the last one, they read about all the deaths that happened, the diseases that happened, that were happening at Valley Forge. And what they're supposed to do is, I have 2 big teddy bears in the classroom, and what they're supposed to do is very carefully, as if they were dead, basically pick them up, carry them over to a place that's far away from the other students, right? Again, because the idea is there's disease, these teddy bears have died of disease, so you need to keep them away from the camps, away from the soldiers, and basically find a resting place for them. And then I have a little tombstone that they fill out, explaining kind of what happened to them, obviously fictitiously, what happened to these teddy bears, and that's what they're supposed to do for that station. At the very end, they basically answer the question of what was the worst part about being a soldier at Valley Forge. So of course, the whole goal of this little station / simulation activity is for them to really understand the horrible conditions that were at Valley Forge. So by adding those short little activities, it really brings everything to life, right? This activity is basically just a little regular stations activity where they read about the horrible things that happen at Valley Forge, but by adding those short little fun activities sprinkled throughout the stations, and that beginning part, right, me being dressed up as George Washington and reading that little speech to them, it really adds a different level of fun to this lesson that really allows the students, as they're even reading and answering those questions, a very simple part of the lesson, it engages them on another level and gets them excited about the lesson, and hopefully it helps them understand what was going on at Valley Forge in a deeper and more fun way. I will say this lesson works a lot better when you have less students. So my classroom was kind of crowded. So if you do have a lot of students, just keep that in mind. I would try it out first with the smaller group. If you have a smaller group, one of my classes happens to be a lot smaller than the rest of my classes, and it just happened to work out a lot better. And you also got to be very clear with the students about the expectations. It is going to be a little chaotic because there's 5 different activities going on at the same time. So what I did is, before I let them go onto the stations and start doing the stations and the activities, I explained each little station or each little activity in a station in quickly, not to spend too much time on it, right? Really quick, so they can have a general idea of what they were supposed to be doing. Of course, went over expectations of how they should behave and how this was a fun thing we were going to do, and if they can't handle it, that we were going to stop the activity and do something else, right? So of course, even though it is a very chaotic lesson, by nature it's like that, because there's 5 different things going on. It is very important for you as a teacher to have that control, because if you lose some of that control, which I was feeling in one of my periods where it wasn't as controlled, it could be a problem, right? And it could lead to the students not learning what they were supposed to learn on that given day. So it's definitely very important to communicate those expectations of how the lesson's going to go and what they're supposed to be doing, or else it can turn into a lot of chaos. But I definitely recommend this lesson. Again, the links are going to be in the description of the video to the intro video that goes along with this, as well as the lesson itself with the activities and the stations. All right, and thank you guys for watching, and make sure you give it a try.
Okay.
That's it. Just cut the camera.
Go.